Max Verstappen has caused up quite the drama in the paddock with his latest move on Lando Norris, but a huge question has been asked after this race. Are we back to the pre-championship winning version of Verstappen? And if so, how can Norris or any other driver who's able to fight him for the top be able to hold off these aggressive driving styles? Now that Red Bull has kind of lost the competitive edge compared to the other teams, they might resort to all sorts of tactics in order to keep up as many points in their pocket as possible. So, could that mean that Verstappen would be forced to fight for every point given the poor performance of Perez? Well, it goes without saying that the crash between Norris and Verstappen during the Austrian GP is going to be talked about a lot. And even though there are two sides of the stories told by both of the drivers, the situation comes at a common end. It's Verstappen who was at fault. Braking under moving, not giving the position back while losing it at the apex of turn 2, and simply not admitting that you're in the wrong should not be stuff done by a 3-time world champion. But here we are, and Verstappen himself is now seemingly back in the form that we used to support in 2021 simply because we were bored of the domination from Lewis Hamilton. A primary difference as to why this crash happened and many others didn't, where Leclerc and Hamilton were the ones racing with Verstappen, is because these two drivers knew how to back off a fight and waited for a better moment if they had the opportunity. The nature of Max is simple. Anything under P1 is considered a loss, and if you don't like it, it's your problem to deal with. The racing manners shown against Norris in Austria, which were highly affected by the slow pit stop of Verstappen, as well as the fact that the Brit had a fresh set of medium compound tyres while Verstappen had to be mounted with a used one, goes to show that we will definitely see more of these battles. Norris himself was quite disappointed in the race manners that were shown by Verstappen, and when talking about this to a greater extent, the Brit went on to say, "I look forward to probably just a fair battle, a strong fair battle, but I wouldn't say that's what it was in the end, and it's a tough one to take. It was a mistake-free race from my side, and I feel like I did a good job, but I got taken out of the race, so nothing more than that. There is a rule, and you're not allowed to react to the other driver, which is what Verstappen did 3 times out of the 3 launches I've had. 2 times I managed to avoid it and not lock up and run into him, and the 3rd time he just ran into me. I was trying to drive my race, and he was clearly a lot slower at the end. He ruined his own race as much as he ruined mine." Obviously, there is a huge problem here, and that's the driving from Verstappen that many of us believe was left back in 2021 with his first championship. However, once Norris started to cut down the lead in the second half of the race, something he's done quite frequently this year, such as in Imola, Verstappen started to blame the car and the behaviour of the tyres. On such a short circuit, you could benefit a lot from the traffic and the DRS that these cars can provide you, which is how Verstappen managed to keep the advantage ahead of Norris in this part of the race, even though it was quite impressive that he built 8 seconds of advantage in the early stages and managed to cruise for the majority of the race. But according to Andrea Stella, the problem dates back to 2021, when racing situations similar to this one between Verstappen and Hamilton weren't addressed properly, and therefore naturally it would be only normal for them to repeat in the future, and they have repeated in Austria. When talking about this incident, the team boss at McLaren said, "I see that the entire population in the world knows who's responsible except for a group of people in Red Bull, but the problem behind this is that you don't address these things. Honestly, they'll come back. They have come back today because they were not addressed properly in the past when there were some fights with Lewis. That needed to be punished in a harsher way, like this. You learn how to race in a certain way, which we can consider fair and square." There have been many episodes of this, and the fact is that we've had so much respect for Red Bull and so much respect for Max. They don't need to do this as a way to almost compromise your reputation. Well, more or less, it's safe to assume that Norris wasn't happy with how the race ended up for him, because in the sprint race, he managed to pass Verstappen at this place, but effectively lost it at the end of the straight, even with open DRS as he left the door wide open. He was under a lot of pressure to prove that he can fight Verstappen in a car that seems to be far more dominant than the RB20, considering where Perez is with the same car qualifying more than a second behind his teammate on a track that takes just about a minute to get around in total during the qualifying sessions. It wasn't truly a guarantee that we were going to see a race up until the third pit stop, but even before Verstappen entered to change on the medium compound tyre in the same lap with Norris, one in which the Brit gained more than 3 seconds just in the pit stop, the Dutchman complained about the behaviour of the car on the hard tyres and said there's a lot of things that need to be done better in order to avoid situations like this in the future. When talking about the entire incident as well as the race, which effectively saw Verstappen end up as a winner given the fact that the other two drivers below him in the Drivers' Championship didn't score points in the race, while the Dutchman scored 10 from the race as well as 8 from the sprint event, he went on to say, "I need to look back at how or why we touch. Of course we will talk about it. It's just unfortunate that it happened. I felt like sometimes he dive bombed so late on the brakes. One time he went straight, one time I had to go around the sausage, otherwise we would have touched. I think it's also the shape of the corner that sometimes cause these kinds of issues. I've also had it the other way around, and it is what it is. It's never nice to come together." No question about it. Verstappen knows that he has been the man who needs to be blamed for the incident, even though he tried to defend himself in many ways, such as saying that dive bombing isn't the proper way to overtake. Just a brief reminder, Jeddah, Abu Dhabi in 2021, as well as the defensive skill set that Verstappen has shown in Imola and Interlagos in these same years, are kind of going contrary to what he's saying, as he tends to forget that in times where you don't have the most superior car in your hands, you tend to use all of the weapons available, and truth be told, Lando didn't use anything illegal. As a matter of fact, he should have done the job much earlier than he did, but it is what it is, and this is where Lando is missing out a lot compared to Leclerc and Hamilton. These two have what it takes to fight against a driver of Max's caliber. Throughout the entire 2021 season, Hamilton was able to avoid these types of contact for the greater good of his race, and eventually managed to get past Verstappen in most of the situations in a cleaner manner afterwards. Norris, however, didn't yield, which was a proper thing for him to do, as he's also shown Verstappen that when a racing situation like this comes in the future again, and trust me, there will be plenty, he won't be the driver to back down. Obviously, there will be a lot of fighting between these two, but at the end, the result will always be a bit more threatening to Verstappen because he doesn't have a teammate who's constantly following him, and he cannot always bet that it won't be Leclerc on the third place waiting to benefit from situations like this. With all this in mind, do you think that it's Verstappen who's at fault for what happened in Austria? And if so, do you think that more repercussions should follow from the FIA? Let us know in the comments down below, and once you do that, make sure to click on the video that appears on your screen right now.